college in Shawnee County. Went to KU, got a history degree, which you can't do anything with, and so I always, both my folks had postgraduate degrees, and I always knew that I would go on and get training in a graduate level to be able to do something, but I really didn't know what that was. And really after I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I came to Topeka. My husband started law school, and I started teaching school. I taught for 2 years, and then I decided to do something, and so I was looking at either getting a postgraduate degree in history, an MBA, or law degree, and so I was looking at all of those things. And one day, my husband, who was in law school at Washburn, took me up to law school, and I met with the assistant dean, Slover. And he said, well, this is my wife, Dean Slover, and she's kind of thinking about going to law school. She's kind of thinking about doing other things. What will you talk to her? And so he did. And he said, well, what was your undergraduate degree? What was your undergraduate grade point average? He said, have you taken the LSAT? I said, yes. He said, how'd you do? And he said, okay. Now maybe I actually applied to law school, but it's not my recollection that I did any more, or did a lot more than just kind of go, okay, well, they're going to let me in law school. That sounds like a pretty good deal for me. And so my husband at that time was still, he was a senior. We borrowed a little bit of money. Our folks helped us out a little bit, and back then it wasn't as expensive to go to law school. And we were both in school together for 1 year. I mean, one reason that I probably got into law school as easily is because I think for the first time ever, Washburn was trying to add a certain number of women to its entering class. I didn't really realize at that time, but when I got into law school, there were actually 10% of us that were women. That was, part of it. So I got that, but no, and so there was a little bit of an encouragement from a lot of people. It was a great academic exercise, but there was a lot of material. And really, in my previous undergraduate work, I probably hadn't really challenged myself academically. And it was terrifying. And it wasn't that the matter was anything was so difficult, it's just that there was so much of it. And I couldn't just breeze through it. I had to read all the stuff. I had to be ready, and if somebody called on me, it wasn't that maybe so much of an issue of really wanting the knowledge. It's just not wanting to be made a fool of, in law school. But that fear of not wanting to really mess up carries you through a lot of good work anyway. So I don't know. Maybe eventually just finally getting a whole big picture of what law school was all about. Maybe because I hadn't thought about it ahead of time, I probably compartmentalized a lot of things. Well, this is contracts, this is criminal law, this is this. And it really wasn't until you study for the bar exam or until you kind of finished up that it all starts to come together. And this idea of, thinking like a lawyer is an evolving process. But anyway, it started to come together, but that was a little bit difficult. I loved it, and while law school is kind of almost a liberal arts training for a lot of people, to me it was a trade school because it gave me the ability to take some of my liberal arts training and actually allow me to do something with it. And I loved it, and I've always treasured my legal education. But even back then, I wasn't real sure that I wanted to be an attorney in the traditional sense, or a trial attorney. I clerked up at the Supreme Court. I went to work for Justice Botzer. He hired me, and then like two or 3 months later, he decided to retire. And then I kind of went, oh, well, what's going to happen? So I was able to stay on and clerk for Justice Holmes, and that was a fabulous experience. I just wish everybody could go through it because you have unlimited resources to really be able to delve into legal issues. While anybody in private practice or on the bench or anything else, most of the time, you're applying for what you know. You can definitely take things under advisement and go back through there. But it was just really fun to know that I had found everything about a certain subject. And when I started finding the same things over and over again, I went, okay, it's time to just, write up a memo on this and get started. But that was really a wonderful experience. And I worked with other people. It honed my research and writing skills, and it was a really luxurious way to learn a lot more about the law, and it was fun. And some of that was just kind of what I really wanted to do, and then the other thing was, maybe I really didn't want to compete with my husband, who was also an attorney. So I always wanted some, and he probably always wanted some differentiation in what we were doing. We stayed around Topeka for a couple of years. He had clerked for the Supreme Court. I got a job clerking for the Supreme Court. He stayed on work for a while for the Attorney General's office. And then I ended up going over to Kansas City. He was kind of looking for something over there, but ended up finding a job back in Garden City. And so we moved back there. And Garden City is, a smaller town. And with me not really wanting to go into private practice, I started looking around at what else I could do. And so I obtained employment at a bank and worked as their bank counsel, and yet I was involved in the commercial side of the bank also, where I originated commercial loans and really started a real estate department for the bank. The city was able to get authority to hire 2 new magistrates and to establish them, and so they went through that process. And I applied mostly because of my frustration with how particularly the child needed care cases were being handled. And often back in western Kansas, a lot of the cases were being heard by lay magistrates that really did only have a high school education. And the easiest way to kind of make things work was to make sure you looked over at the prosecutor, and they kind of kept you going. But really, as far as what due process was, or really what a real good understanding of the law is, there's no way, even if that a lay-trained individual can really understand what they need to do to make those more subtle distinctions and make them work. So at that time, and still now, it doesn't require a law degree to be a magistrate judge, but I applied and was selected. A magistrate judge is a judge of lesser jurisdiction, so they can't hear the district court that we are now can hear any case coming before the on the trial level. But a magistrate judge can only hear certain things. They can hear misdemeanors, they can hear juvenile cases, they can hear child needed care cases that now they've changed it so that you can't decide the severance hearings, but back when I was that you could. Probate matters, it's defined by statute, so the legislature decides what you do, and it even though it's a lesser judgeship, it's one that most of the people see. As you kind of go up through the food chain, you run into fewer and fewer people. People on the Supreme Court don't get to see that many people, and they see kind of the same people all the time. But, as a magistrate, you just hear a lot of cases, and, people haven't written dispositive motions, and there aren't, things like that, but there's a lot of, you learn evidence, you learn procedure, you learn how to handle people, and I loved working with people. And there's one thing about me that I always, a lot of times would tell people, especially if they weren't represented by counsel, I would inquire about them whether or not they'd really tried to resolve this issue themselves. Now, obviously, it was enough of a problem that they filed some sort of lawsuit to get in front of me. But, sometimes people don't realize that they then can try and resolve that issue. And oftentimes I would give them a chance to do that on their own, because I feel that, it's my job as a judge to make that decision. And I'll do it to the best of my ability. I'll listen to the evidence as best I can. I'll apply the law as best I know it. I'll research when I need to come up with what that is. But even if I make a great decision and apply all the law, it's never maybe going to be as satisfactory to one or both parties as if they didn't resolve that case themselves. So from a very early standpoint, I would tell people, it's my job, I'll make a decision, but if you want to try and resolve this, I'll give you some time to do that. And so even though I think the job of being a judge is important, I think that you need to keep it in perspective and realize that there are other ways of resolving these issues that are sometimes very beneficial. After 6 years of being out in Garden City, there was a position that opened up on the Court of Tax Appeals, and I did apply for that. And the Tax Appeals Board it's a quasi-judicial administrative agency that hears only state and local tax issues. So after 6 years, my term didn't actually expire for another 2 or 3 years. Really? Yeah. Anyway, 3 years. But I knew that if administrations changed, I probably would not have much of a chance of staying on. And they're type of positions that end up turning over eventually anyway. So when this position with the district court in Shawnee County came up, I did make application. And I was one of the 3 finalists after being interviewed with the nominating committee. And I was lucky enough, the stars lined up enough to be named by the governor to this position. So that's where I am now. And I've been involved in different roles and different assignments with this court, but now I do all civil work. So the things I like most is just being involved with people. And as a judge, you're kind of alone. It's a more lonely, isolated lifestyle. But in the courtroom, you get to hear people's problems and concerns and worries. And if you're able to help them work through that in an efficient way, that's good. Even if they're not as happy with the ultimate result, there's some finality to it. And it's going through any type of litigation is an excruciating experience for anybody. And just to try and help them understand the process and help them get through it, I like being able to try and do that. We're supposed to we're supposed to have a good idea of what goes on. We're supposed to have a life, but we're not supposed to develop contacts and positions that would interfere with our ability to be fair and impartial and being perceived as fair and impartial. And that worry, even though all of us, have different lives outside the bench, we're never really away from it. We're always a judge. And it's not that I'm just this wild and crazy person that's so inhibited by being able to express myself, obviously not. But, there's always just a little bit of a restraint. So, maybe that's good, but I think that keeps you from maybe being as involved. I always loved all the charitable and fundraising activities that I was in banking. They encourage bankers to do that sort of thing. And I was good at it, and I liked being able to do things, and some people would rather do anything but ask somebody for money. I didn't mind asking somebody for money, I really believed in. But, so I missed some of that involvement, really active involvement. You're always standing back just a little bit and participate. You want good things to happen, but you're not pushing it as much. And I think a lot of those informal things are what really make your community a good community. Know that you have an incredible amount of power, but I don't focus as much on that as I do about the process of trying to work things efficiently. And maybe that's why I don't remember some of the cases, even though there are some that I've been really proud of how I came to a decision on it, or was able to come to a decision. But I think the process is always important. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that we as judges don't take kind of a customer service approach to providing legal services for people. We get maybe at times we're almost encouraged to look at our own role in this rather than everybody else's. And maybe it was, my old banking experience. But somehow, I think there's not enough emphasis at times to really make it a workable, effective process for the people going through it. And I've worked with a little bit the American, let's say AL, that's think tank out of Denver, American Society for the Advancement of the Legal System, something like that. And they talk about, how to make discovery and make issues more efficient, how to really run your court more efficiently. Sometimes we do things just always the same way. And I think that there are reasons that people don't always respect that. I mean, they don't love coming to court, but they have to be here, and we ought to make it a little bit better process for them. And I wish at times that we had more focus on that. I wish we had more ability to focus on it. I wish we had the resources to sometime, provide that. But I'd like to see that as something that judges talk about.